A $2 treatment could be the difference between an outboard that dies at 1,500 hours and one that survives past 5,000. The shocking truth is, many engines do not fail from bad design. They fail from what happens between trips. In this video, I am counting down 7 habits that separate long-lasting Japanese outboards from expensive rebuilds, ending with the simple routine most owners never learn. Number 7. The killer isn't the ocean. It's what the ocean leaves behind. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you buy a saltwater outboard. Running in salt water isn't what destroys it. Salt water itself is not the killer. It's the residue that gets left behind after the water is gone. Every time you finish a trip, pull the boat out and let the engine sit. The water trapped inside the cooling passages, exhaust system, and internal cavities begins to evaporate. The water disappears, but the microscopic salt crystals remain stuck to the aluminum surfaces inside your motor. Those crystals are extremely aggressive because salt is hygroscopic, meaning it attracts and holds moisture from the air, creating a constantly damp environment against bare metal, even when the engine looks completely dry from the outside. Over time, those deposits accelerate corrosion inside the water jackets, cooling channels, fasteners, and exhaust components where you can't see the damage happening. The engine usually isn't being destroyed while it's running. It's being damaged during the hours, days, and months it spends sitting between trips. This is why 2 identical outboards with the same hours on the clock can end up with completely different lifespans. One owner takes the extra few minutes after every trip to flush the engine, remove salt, protect exposed components, and store it properly. The other owner shuts it down, covers the boat, and assumes the damage stops when the engine stops running. But that's when the slow corrosion process often begins. Salt residue, trapped moisture, and mineral deposits continue attacking the metal while the engine sits untouched between trips. The difference isn't how hard the engines were operated or how many hours they accumulated, it's how well they were cared for during the hours they weren't running. The engine doesn't know the difference between a gentle cruise and a hard day on the water. It only knows whether it was properly protected afterward. Which brings us to number 6, but the deeper you look, the more interesting it becomes. Number 6. Muffs and a garden hose aren't flushing. They're rinsing the lawn. Most owners think they are protecting their outboard by flushing it, but many are only doing the easiest part of the job. They clamp earmuffs over the lower unit intakes, turn on the hose, start the engine, let it idle for a few minutes, and assume the salt is gone. It feels like proper maintenance, but in many cases, it is only a partial flush. The problem is that water does not travel equally through every part of the cooling system. With earmuffs, the water pump pulls from the intakes and moves water through the easiest available paths. But some of the tighter cooling passages, thermostat areas, and exhaust side cavities may not get the same aggressive rinse, especially at idle. Those are exactly the areas where heat and salt deposits combine to create the worst corrosion. The salt residue left behind in those hidden passages continues attacking the aluminum long after the boat is back on the trailer. Many modern outboards from Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda, and Mercury include dedicated flush ports for this reason. A flush port connects directly to the cooling system and uses household water pressure to push fresh water through the internal passages without relying entirely on the water pump. If your engine has both a flush port and traditional muffs, understand the difference. The flush port is for removing salt buildup, while muffs are useful when you specifically need the engine running and the water pump circulating. 10 minutes using the proper flush connection can remove more salt from the cooling system than letting the engine sit and idle on muffs for much longer. The difference is not about how long water runs through the motor, it is about where that water actually reaches. A proper flush pushes fresh water through the passages where salt buildup causes the most damage, helping clear areas around the cooling jackets, thermostat housing, and exhaust passages that often get neglected. But even the best freshwater flush cannot always remove every microscopic salt deposit left behind after repeated saltwater use. Some residue can remain trapped inside, and continue causing corrosion long after the engine looks clean on the outside. A good flush removes the salt you can reach. But number 5 is about the salt deposits that survive even after you think the job is done. But the next position belongs to a true classic. Number 5. Salt that's already crystallized laughs at plain water. Here's the trap most owners never hear about. Once salt dries and crystallizes inside the engine, plain freshwater flushing may not be enough to completely remove it. The moment you shut down a saltwater outboard, the water trapped inside the cooling passages begins evaporating, leaving behind microscopic salt crystals clinging to the internal metal surfaces. Those crystals don't always rinse away easily because they can bond to oxidized aluminum and settle into tight cooling passages where water flow is weaker. A normal freshwater flush removes loose salt and residue, but it can leave behind a stubborn layer that slowly builds over years. This is why some engines that were flushed every time still develop internal corrosion problems. The missing piece is using a quality salt-dissolving marine flush additive designed to change the water chemistry and break down those hardened chloride deposits so they can be carried out of the cooling system. These products are not meant to replace normal freshwater flushing, but they can be used periodically, every few flushes or after heavy saltwater use, to remove the deposits that water alone struggles to reach. The goal isn't to over-maintain the engine or waste money on unnecessary products. It's about understanding the specific problem you're trying to prevent and using the right solution at the right time. A simple freshwater flush handles loose salt, but a proper salt-removing treatment can tackle the deposits that water alone leaves behind. The same principle applies to every part of outboard maintenance. Don't wait for a failure, and don't throw random fixes at problems after the damage is already done. Experienced commercial operators follow this exact philosophy. Small, affordable maintenance steps performed consistently before corrosion, wear, or neglect turn into expensive repairs. They don't keep engines running for decades through luck. They do it by preventing small problems from becoming major failures. And that mindset leads directly into number 4, and the next entry might surprise a lot of people. Number 4. Your fuel is rotting faster than your engine is wearing. Walk into almost any marine repair shop and ask the technicians what they spend the most time fixing, and you probably won't hear stories about worn-out power heads or destroyed engines. The majority of repairs are usually much less dramatic, but far more common. Fuel systems, corroded carburetors, stuck injectors, clogged filters, failed fuel pumps, and engines that refuse to start after sitting all trace back to the same two enemies, ethanol and time. Modern pump gas creates a unique problem for boats because, unlike cars, boats often sit for weeks or months with the same fuel inside the tank. Ethanol is hygroscopic, meaning it attracts and absorbs moisture from the humid air entering through the tank vent. Over time, that water can overwhelm the fuel, causing phase separation where the ethanol and water mixture drops out of the gasoline and settles at the bottom of the tank, exactly where the fuel pickup draws from. That corrosive mixture gets pulled straight into the engine, damaging carburetor passages, injectors, and other sensitive fuel components. But water isn't the only problem. Gasoline also begins breaking down as it sits, forming sticky varnish that coats fuel lines, injectors, and carburetor jets. A car may burn through a tank quickly, but a boat can leave that same fuel sitting through an entire season, slowly turning fresh gasoline into a repair bill. The fix used by experienced boat owners isn't complicated. It's fuel discipline. The goal is simple. Never let your outboard sit for weeks or months with untreated fuel slowly breaking down inside the system. Use a quality marine fuel stabilizer every time you know the boat will sit, not just when winterizing, and add it while the fuel is still fresh so it can prevent oxidation before it starts. After adding stabilizer, run the engine long enough to pull the treated fuel through the entire system, the lines, fuel pump, injectors, or carburetor, because stabilized fuel sitting only in the tank does nothing for the untreated fuel already trapped in the engine. Keep the tank reasonably full during storage to reduce the amount of humid air entering and leaving through the vent. which helps limit condensation and water contamination. For smaller portable tanks, some owners choose the opposite approach and store them nearly empty after running the fuel system dry, removing the very fuel that can turn into varnish. The key is consistency. These habits cost only a few dollars per tank, but can prevent some of the most common and expensive outboard failures, from clogged injectors and ruined carburetors to fuel system corrosion. Fuel neglect destroys more engines than high hours ever will. But while clean, stable fuel keeps the engine running, number 3 is what protects the engine from destroying itself from the inside. Moving forward, we arrive at another unexpected contender. Number 3, there is a metal in your engine designed to die so the rest does not. Inside and around every saltwater outboard are small blocks of metal called sacrificial anodes, usually made from zinc, aluminum, or magnesium, and they are one of the most important pieces of corrosion protection on the entire engine. You will find them bolted to areas like the lower unit, transom bracket, trim system, and sometimes other exposed metal components. Their entire purpose is to sacrifice themselves through a process called galvanic corrosion. When different metals are connected and exposed to conductive water, especially salt water, one metal naturally becomes the target and corrodes faster than the others. The anodes are designed to be that target. They act like a corrosion fuse, wearing away so your expensive aluminum gear case, engine components, and hardware survive. The problem is that most owners rarely check them. They see a chunk of metal still attached and assume the protection is still working. But an anode that's heavily consumed, covered in oxidation, or coated with paint may no longer be making the electrical connection needed to protect anything. The result is a motor that looks fine from the outside, while corrosion slowly attacks the expensive parts underneath. A small anode that costs only a few dollars can prevent thousands in damage, but only if it is replaced before it disappears. As a rule, inspect them every season in saltwater use and replace them when roughly half the material has been eaten away. Also make sure you're using the correct anode material for your specific environment, because the wrong alloy can leave your engine vulnerable, even if the anode looks perfectly fine. Saltwater, freshwater, and brackish water each have different electrical properties, and an anode that works well in one environment may become far less effective in another. Aluminum anodes are often the best all-around choice for many mixed or brackish conditions, while other materials may be better suited for specific types of water. The important thing is matching the protection to where you actually run the boat. Keeping your anodes healthy means allowing a cheap, replaceable piece of metal to absorb the corrosion that would otherwise attack your expensive lower unit, brackets, and power head. It is one of the simplest maintenance jobs on an outboard, but it protects some of the most expensive parts to repair. That handles the corrosion coming from the water around the engine. Number 2 deals with the corrosion that starts from the inside, hidden away where you cannot see it until the damage is already done. Next on the list is a name you might recognize. Number 2, the gear case oil tells you the engine is dying before the engine does. At the bottom of your outboard is one of the hardest working and most vulnerable parts of the entire engine, the lower unit gear case. Inside, precision gears and bearings spin under heavy loads while being protected by a bath of gear oil. The only thing separating that expensive machinery from the water around it is a set of small rubber seals, especially the propshaft seals. Those seals are constantly exposed to pressure, vibration, fishing line, sand, and salt, and over time they can slowly fail without any obvious warning. A tiny piece of fishing line wrapped around the propshaft can cut into a seal lip and create a leak path that allows water to enter the gear case. Once water gets inside, the damage begins immediately. It mixes with the gear oil, turning it into a cloudy, milky emulsion that can no longer properly protect the gears and bearings. Instead of lubricating, the contaminated oil allows metal-on-metal wear to accelerate. In colder climates, trapped water creates another danger. It can freeze, expand, and crack the gear case housing itself. The scary part is that this expensive failure often starts as a problem that could have been fixed with a simple seal replacement. The easiest warning sign is the gear oil itself. Healthy lower unit oil should drain out smooth and consistent. If it looks milky, gray, cloudy, or resembles a coffee milkshake, water has entered the system and a seal needs attention. This is why experienced boat owners change lower unit oil regularly, not just because the oil needs replacing, but because every drain is an opportunity to inspect the engine's health. Fresh gear oil is cheap compared to the damage it can reveal. A few dollars of lubricant and a few minutes of inspection can expose a failing seal, worn bearings, or internal gear damage before it turns into a complete lower unit failure. The oil is not just there to protect the gears. It is one of the best diagnostic tools you have because it carries evidence of what is happening inside the gear case. A cloudy color, water contamination, or metallic particles are early warnings that give you a chance to fix a small problem before it becomes a catastrophic repair. Experienced boat owners don't just change fluids, they inspect what comes out because every service is an opportunity to catch problems while they're still affordable. Which brings us finally to number 1, the simple habit that connects every tip on this list. The maintenance routine experienced Japanese fleets consider non-negotiable, and the one many dealers have little reason to emphasize. Now let us move to the next entry on the list. Number 1, the $2 film that stops corrosion where it actually starts. Everything on this list has been circling one enemy, corrosion on bare metal, in the places you can't see, while the engine sits idle. Number 1 is the cheap, boring, wildly effective habit that attacks that enemy directly. And it comes down to a can of corrosion-inhibiting fogging and film spray that costs a couple of dollars per application. Here's the mechanism, and it's real chemistry, not marketing. When you shut a saltwater outboard down and store it, the inside of the power head, cylinder walls, valve surfaces on four-strokes, the internal metal you can't reach, is bare, warm, and coated in a thin film of salt-laden moisture. That's the corrosion nursery. Corrosion-inhibiting spray, marine fogging oil for the internals, and a light anti-corrosion film for the external power head and electrical connections does one simple thing. It lays down a hydrophobic barrier film that physically separates the metal from moisture and oxygen. No water contact, no galvanic cell, no oxidation. The salt can sit there all winter and it has nothing to attack. This is exactly what the commercial fleets do that recreational owners skip. A boat that runs every day never sits long enough to corrode internally. But your boat, the recreational boat that runs a few dozen hours a season and sits for the other 11 months, spends the overwhelming majority of its life parked. That parked time is when it dies. Fogging the internals before storage and filming the externals after every serious salt run is the single practice that most closely mimics why fleet engines outlive private ones. It's not that the fleet engines are pampered. It's that they're never given the idle, salty, unprotected downtime that kills the average outboard. So here's exactly what to do, and it's almost insultingly simple. After a hard saltwater season, or before any storage longer than a few weeks, flush the engine through the flush port until it runs clear. Then, with the engine running per your manual's fogging procedure, introduce marine fogging oil into the intake so it coats the internal cylinder and valve surfaces. You will see it smoke. And that is correct. That is the film laying down. Shut it down. Then take a can of marine corrosion-inhibiting spray, the light film type, and coat the external power head, the electrical connections, the throttle and shift linkages, and the exposed metal under the cowling. Wipe nothing off. The film is the point. Total cost, a couple of dollars of product per treatment out of a can that lasts a season or more. Total time, about 15 minutes. And it directly prevents the exact failure mode, idle time internal corrosion, that scraps the average outboard 1,000 hours before its time. A commercial squid fisherman working out of a port in western Japan documented his fleet's engine hours across more than a decade using nothing more exotic than religious flushing, anode discipline, fuel stabilization, gear oil monitoring, and end-of-season fogging. His oldest active power head crossed 5,000 hours still running original internals. A comparable recreational fleet running the identical engines in the identical water, without that end-of-cycle protection routine, was replacing powerheads at under 2,000 hours. Same engine, same ocean. The entire difference was what happened in the 15 minutes after the last run of each trip, and the couple of dollars of film that bridged the idle months in between. If this helped you make better decisions, subscribe and stay tuned.